Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's VARC video series. Every week we'll be bringing you 3 important tests for VARC, important questions that you must solve regularly so that you can ace VARC section. VARC section is one of those sections where consistent practice is extremely important. You see the gains after a few months. There is no immediate improvement in VARC. So in such cases, you have to put in efforts regularly for months on end before you see any improvement. With that thought in mind, what we have decided is that we will give you regular tests, 3 a week, which you can solve along with us. We'll also give you a PDF of the question so you can actually try attempting the set by yourself and then solve it along with us. So look at the PDF, download it, try to solve the RC or the VA questions, then see the video. Do this consistently. These are only 3 tests a week, so it is extremely doable. But do this consistently and slowly over time you will see yourself improving. So I hope to see you come in every single week and solve these 3 tests. If you need more VARC practice tests, just search for Cracku VARC sets and you will get a lot more tests like these. Keep solving, keep practicing and keep getting better. I hope to see all of you completely crack the VARC section in CAT 2026.
Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Ma'am. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at an RC passage which is on humans' ability to understand music, or musicking as the author says. So let's take a look at the passage. We'll go paragraph by paragraph and then take a look at the questions. Humans today make music. Think beyond all the qualifications that might trail after this bold statement that only certain humans make music, that extensive training is involved, and that many societies distinguish musical specialists from non-musicians, that in today's societies most listen to music rather than making, and so forth. So the author says that, listen, humans can make music. Now you can argue back saying that I can't make music, you can't make music, only 1 in 10 people can make music. You can say all of that. But the fundamental thing is that humans can make music. The point is that it is true that humans can make music. They have the ability to make music. You can argue that, okay, you can quibble about it that only a subset of people can do it, or this is a trained musician, that is not a trained musician. But the basic fact is that humans can make music. These qualifications, however, whatever their local merit, are moot in the face of the overarching truth that making music, considered from a cognitive and psychological vantage, is the province of all those who perceive and experience what is made. We are almost all of us musicians. Everyone who can entrain, not necessarily dance to a beat, who can recognize a repeated tune, not necessarily sing it, who can distinguish one instrument or a singing voice from another. I will often use an antique word recently revived to name this broader musical experience. Humans are musicking creatures. So basically he's arguing that, okay, you can quibble that or not all humans make music, but the author says that all humans are musicians. And why does he say that? He says that from a cognitive and psychological perspective, anybody who can understand music, who can understand a beat, who can follow a beat, who can understand a tune, who can distinguish from one instrument to other, who can distinguish from one voice to other, they are basically musical, they have musical abilities. You might not be able to sing, you might not be able to dance, but every human has that musical ability as such. It is a basic human ability that everybody has. If you quibble about it that, okay, we are not at the, everybody can't make music or dance to music, all of that, the author is saying, no. If I consider these to be the set of definitions of what it is to be a musician, this everybody has. And basically he says that instead of calling ourselves musicians, because that term has different connotations in current culture, I'll use the antiquated term musicking. Musicking basically refers to a basic ability to understand music, and he says that all humans have this basic ability to understand music. So the point of the first paragraph is that humans are musicking creatures, that is, have a basic ability to understand music. Basic musical ability is present. Musical ability is universal. Now let us take a look at the next paragraph. The set of capacities that enables musicking is a principal marker of modern humanity. There is nothing polemical in this assertion except a certain insistence, which will figure often in what follows, that musicking be included in our thinking about fundamental human commonalities. So the author says that, okay, our ability to understand music, or our ability to do musicking is essentially shows that it is a marker of modern humanity. What do we mean by marker of modern humanity? When you see humans as a species, what is a characteristic of modern humans? What is the characteristic of us as modern humans as compared to like prehistoric humans? And that is essentially our ability to understand music. Musicking is one of the characteristics of modern humans as such. And the author basically says that this is not a controversial opinion as such, other than the fact that if you say that it should be included in what we consider as a fundamental human commonality, basically saying that it is something that is common to all humans all over the world. Once you think of it in that way, essentially it's something that is very basic and universal to humans as such. Capacities involved in musicking are many and take shape in complicated ways arising from innate dispositions. Many of these capacities overlap in non-musical ones, though a few may be distinct and dedicated to musical perception and production. In the area of overlap, linguistic capacities seem to be particularly important, and humans are in principle language makers in addition to music makers, speaking creatures as much as musicking creatures. So he's basically saying that humans, essentially musicking is a marker, musicking is a marker of modern humanity. A human commonality. Human commonality basically means universal to all modern humans. And the capacities overlap with other like markers of humanity, other capacities that have developed in humans, but they are not necessarily completely overlapping. Like something that makes us distinctly human as compared to animals is our ability to speak. So we are speaking animals, but also one of the characteristic things that makes us different from others are we are also musicking animals. So essentially universal to all humans, we are speaking as well as musicking creatures. Speaking and musicking, characteristic of modern humanity. Humans are symbol makers, a feature tightly bound up with language, not so tightly with music. The species Cassera, dubbed Homo symbolicus, cannot help but tangle musicking in webs of symbolic thought and expressions, habitually making it a component of behavioral complexes that form such expressions. But in fundamental terms, music is neither language-like nor symbol-like, and from these differences come the many clues to its ancient emergence as such. So we are symbol makers also, like we are speaking creatures, like we are musicking creatures, we are also symbol makers, and you can tangle it up in our ability to write, in our ability to speak, and in our ability to form symbols as such. But musicking is a separate capacity, separate from our ability to write symbols or thinking symbols, and separate from our speaking ability as such. So essentially musicking overlaps with other abilities but is a separate ability as such. Okay, and why is this important? Why is this important that it is a separate ability? Because then you can actually trace when it evolved. Because if it was something that evolved along with speech and symbols, then you'll have to trace it with speech and symbols. But if it is a separate capacity, you have to think of when it evolved, and you can separately identify when it evolved as such. Time of emergence can be checked as such. If musicking is a primary shared trait of modern humans, then to describe its emergence must be to detail the coalescing of that modernity. This took place, archaeologists are clear, over a very long duration, at least 50,000 years ago or so. More likely something closer to 200,000, depending in part on what that coalescence is taken to comprise. If we look back at 20,000 years, a small portion of this long period, we reach the lives of humans whose musical capabilities were probably little different from our own. As we look farther back, we reach horizons where the similarity can no longer hold. perhaps 40,000 years ago, perhaps 70,000 years ago, perhaps 100,000. But we never cross a line where before which all the cognitive capacities recruited in modern musicking abruptly disappear. Unless we embrace the incredible notion that musicking sprang forth in full-blown glory, its emergence will have to be tracked in a gradualist terms across a long period. So essentially, why is the author interested in tracking the emergence of musicking? Because if you track the emergence of musicking, and if you say musicking is a trait of modern humanity, so when musicking emerged, that is when you would say, okay, this is the start of modern humanity. So his significance of emergence of musicking, and what he realizes about significance of emergence of musicking, there is no such one point at which you suddenly see musicking ability. You see that it had gradually developed. At 20,000 years ago, it was pretty similar to us, but it was there in some form or the other, even 40,000 years ago, 70,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, in some smaller form as such. It is not that it suddenly burst forth, it gradually grew as such, and it gradually emerged. This ability gradually emerged over time. This is one general feature of history of music's emergence. The history was at once socio-cultural and biological. The capacities recruited in musicking are many. So describing its emergence involves following several or many separate strands. So basically the author is saying that there are several factors in the emergence of musicking, and you have to track several different strands to understand the emergence of musicking. So what is being basically discussed over here? How musicking is essentially a marker or a characteristic of modern humanity, how it is a distinct capability, distinct from speaking and symbolism. It is a distinct marker of how we became the modern humans that we are. It's a modern capacity, and all humans universally have this capacity. And if we understand how it emerged, we would be able to understand how the modern human emerged as such. So that is basically what is being discussed. Musicking as a capability, musicking as a marker of modern humanity. So now that we understand all of that, let's take a look at the questions. Which one of the following sets of terms best serves as keywords to the passage? Musicking, cognitive psychology, antique, symbol makers, modernity. Humans' capacities, language, symbols, modernity. Humans' musicking, linguistic capacity, symbol making, modern humanity. Humans' psychological vantage, musicking, consider emergence. So there are two ways in which I actually solve questions like this. Things that absolutely must be there and that should not be there, and this is basically elimination. So once I find out what absolutely must be there, I then say that okay, this absolutely must be there, and then I eliminate things by saying that this is definitely not important at all. So what is one term that absolutely must be there? Musicking is one term which absolutely must be there because it is the central term that is being discussed throughout the passage. It absolutely must be there as such. I would even say that it is a marker for modern humanity is also an important aspect of what is discussed in the passage. So these two I would say are must. This especially is an absolute must. If it is not there, we can directly eliminate the option. Apart from that, I'll go through the options and say that okay, this is not really an important term, and then we can find out okay, this is not really a correct option. So let's take a look at the option. First option, musicking is there. Cognitive psychology is there. Cognitive psychology is discussed in terms of like from a cognitive and psychological viewpoint. It was everybody experiences that, it is universal in nature is what is being discussed. So this is not exactly an important keyword as such in the passage. So I can say that this is the wrong option. Antique is also not this. He says that this is an antique term, but the term is important, not the fact that it is antique as such. So again, an incorrect this. Symbol makers is important. It talks about how symbol making is also a characteristic, but music making is separate from it. So I would say it is an important this. Modernity is also correct. Modernity or modern humanity are both acceptable. But because of these two options, I would say this is the incorrect one. Humans, capacities, language, symbols, modernity. The most important term musicking is missing, so I can directly eliminate this. Humans, musicking, linguistic capacities, symbol making, modern humanity. Both are there. Symbol making is also important. Linguistic capacities, the comparison with linguistic capacities and symbol making capacities are there as part of the passage, so they are important. And humans or human ability or how musicking is universal to humans is also there. So every single term over here is important. There are no extraneous terms. So I would say this is the right option. Human psychological vantage. Psychological vantage is also wrong, because psychological vantage is given just to say that it is basically mentioned just to say that this musicking ability is universal in humans. So again, it is not something which is primarily a keyword or a point of focus as such. Musicking is there. Cassirer again is not true. Cassirer is basically what Homo symbolicus was called, and it was just a not at all a keyword or a focal point in the passage, so can be eliminated. Emergence of music, not music but musicking as a musical ability as such. So this is also incorrect, but these two are clearly incorrect, so option D is definitely incorrect. C would be the right answer. So let's take a look at the second question. Think beyond all the qualifications that might trail after this bold statement. So what is a bold statement? A statement which is basically plainly made without any explanation or giving any kind of details as such. So basically it says humans today make music, which is like a Captain Obvious statement, that there is no explanation. What is he trying to say? So that is basically a bold statement, because it's a obvious statement without any explanation or what the author is trying to say through it. So he basically says that if you say, just take this basic statement which is true, you can say that not all humans make music, or musical ability is different among different people. Some people are specifically called musicians and others are non-musicians. You can put all such qualifications, but essentially all humans make music is universally true. That is the implication that he is making through that particular line. So in the context of the passage, what is the author trying to communicate in this quoted extract? A bold statement is one that is trailed by a series of qualifying clarifications and caveats. That is not what a bold statement is. And in this case, this bold statement is trailed by a series of qualifying clarifications. But in general, basically a bold statement is one with no explanation. And in this case, the author says that if you ignore the caveat, this statement is still true. So A is incorrect. A bold statement is one that requires no qualification to infer its meaning. No, a bold statement is one which has is a self-evident statement with no explanation. So this is not that it requires no qualifications. In this particular case, you can have qualifications, but the author is saying despite the qualifications, the statement is still true if you take it at a broader level of what musical ability is as. Although there may be caveats and other considerations, the statement is essentially true. This is exactly what the author is saying, that this statement, this plain statement is essentially true. You can say that not all humans make music, some people are musicians, others are non-musicians, but this statement is essentially true, because when you say that ability to make music is ability to follow and understand music, then all have musical ability. So this statement is essentially true, despite how you might quibble about it, but this statement is essentially true. Thinking beyond the qualifications allows us to give free rein to musical expressions. Not at all what the point is. He's not asking us to think beyond the qualifications. He's saying that if you ignore those qualifications and the caveats, this statement is true. So C is the right answer. Based on the passage, which of one of the following statements is a valid argument about the emergence of music or musicking? So let us take a look at the options. We have to find out a valid argument about the emergence of the musicking ability. Anyone who can perceive and experience music must be considered capable of musicking. It's not anybody who can perceive music. He gives an example. We are almost all of us musicians. Everyone who can entrain, not necessarily dance to a beat, who can recognize a repeated tune, not necessarily sing it, who can distinguish one instrument or a singing voice from another. So basically he gives a list of things, but just perceive music is not one of them, because I would assume that even animals can perceive music. So it is not really, perceiving music would not be, it would be too broad a definition of what is musicking. So this is not correct as per what the passage considers musicking ability among humans, because it considers it a mark of humanity. Although musicking is not language-like, it shares the quality of being a form of expression. He says that it is a form of expression. He does not say it is not language-like. In fact, he says that many musicking, the capacity for musicking overlaps considerably with the capacity for language as such. So he does not say that it is not language-like. So this is also incorrect. 20,000 years ago, human musical capacities were not very different from what they are today. This is true because the author says that if you go back 20,000 years ago, a small portion of this long period, we reach the lives of humans whose musical capacities were probably little different from our own. So their musical capabilities were pretty much close to our musical capabilities as such. So this is true as per the passage. So I'd say this is a valid argument about the emergence of musicking. Option D is all musical work is located in the overlap between linguistic capacity and music production. The author in fact says that much is located in this overlap, but much actually means that not all is located. So D is definitely not a valid argument. So C is the right answer. Let's take a look at the last question. Which one of the following statements, if true, would weaken the author's claim that humans are musicking creatures? So he's basically saying that it is a mark of modern humanity, it is universal nature, it is the mark of what makes us modern humans. And if you trace the evolution of emergence of musicking, you trace the emergence of modern humanity. This is his main argument. So we have to see something that attacks this argument as such. Non-musical capacities are a far greater consequence to human survival than the capacity for music. Human survival is not what the author is considering. The author is considering what makes us, what is a characteristic of modern humanity, not what is a characteristic of modern humanity's survival. So A is completely tangential to the point the author is making. From a cognitive and psychological vantage, musicking arises from unconscious dispositions, not conscious ones. Even if they are unconscious dispositions, they are still human dispositions. They are still human abilities. So, as long as they are human abilities and universal human abilities, his point is not invalidated as such. So, B also is not weakening his point. As musicking is neither language-like nor symbol-like, it is much older form of expression. That is actually what the author says, that it is something that if you trace back, it is its emergence is not exactly overlapping with either language or symbols, but it is something which is completely entirely different in its emergence. And if you find out that point of emergence, you would find out the emergence of modern humanity. So this is actually congruent with what he is saying. So it's not weakening what he is saying at all. Musical capacities are primarily socio-cultural, which explains the wide diversity of musical forms. Now, if this is the case that musical capacity is socio-cultural, that means musical capacity is not unique. It is not universal. It is not something which is similar to what there was 20,000 years ago. Because 20,000 years ago, our social and cultural abilities were very clearly different. So when he says that okay, musical capacity is musicking, or the musical capacity is an identity of or a marker of humanity, modern humanity, that is clearly wrong, because musical capacity is essentially developed through socio-cultural factors that are present today, not that were there like thousands of years back. So D would completely weaken his point, because then musicking is no longer universal, it is no longer something that emerged with the start of modern humanity, it is not a marker of modern humanity at all. So D basically weakens his point the most, so D would be the right answer.
Every serious CAT aspirant needs a secret weapon for the revision. This is yours, the Cracku CAT Formula PDF. It is not just a list, it's comprehensive and topic-wise guide for every formula you'll ever need to know. We've built it to be only formula sheet you'll ever need for your preparation, and we're giving it away for free. Find it easily. Just go to Google and search Cracku CAT Formula PDF. Download it, master it, and walk into the exam with confidence.